Let me now invite to the stage our next speaker, Dr. Bhaswati Bhattacharya, Clinical Assistant Professor of Family Medicine at Weill Cornell Medical College and a Fulbright Specialist in Global Public Health, specializing in integrative medicine. A Harvard-trained physician with a PhD in Ayurvedic chemistry and pharmacology, she has spent over 2 decades bridging indigenous medical systems with modern biomedicine. Let's hear from Dr. Bhattacharya.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. I would like to begin with a mantra, which is the mantra of wisdom. For those of you who know Saraswati, please join me. Ya kundendu tusharahara dhavala, ya shubra vastra vrata, ya veena varadanda manditakara, ya shweta padmasana, ya brahma achyuta shankara prabhritibhir, devai sada vandita, samam patu saraswati bhagavati nishesha jadyapaha. Saraswati is that part of us inside that is devoted to wisdom and that understands the power of sound, which sometimes comes as music, sometimes comes as speech, and sometimes comes in the form of, we'll say, other sensory experiences that give us wisdom. We have that inside. Every one of us has that. Whether or not it's awake or needs to be further awakened is something that we need to consider. And so when we teach Ayurveda, we begin with mantra because, as you heard it, for someone, if they pronounce it perfectly, it will transmit to you a certain energy. So I'm going to talk about 5 different proposals as strategies for harmonizing TCIM with the rest of the world and bringing the modern politics of medicine, which Akshay Bambari talked about a little bit, with ancient systems of wellness, health, and kindness, and also vidya, which is true knowledge. We have a lot of avidya today. In American English, it's called fake news, which is, of course, popularized by our president. And I didn't vote for him. And vidya and avidya have been a part of Ayurveda for many, many millennia, talking about what actually works and the truth and the evidence of what actually works. So let's talk about evidence. Evidence as the basis of believing what is medicine is what we are taught in medical school. So some of you know that I'm a modern medical doctor, trained and practiced at New York Presbyterian Hospital since, I guess I've been there since 1997. And then on this side, there's the group of people who believe in experience, practice-based evidence as the experience. So when we look at the evidence-based medicine triad, which was put together by David Sackett and his group in 1996, I was in medical school at the time, and he talked about the importance of evidence as a base for all medicines. And I believe Dr. Spicek talked about this, and several other scientists also spoke about this. But what doesn't come through in the research literature is that there's actually not just the evidence that we see in clinical studies, the A1 level, B1 level evidence, but there's actually an idea that whatever evidence there is should show good patient outcomes, improve patient outcomes, but it should be aligned with the patient's values and with the patient's expectations, actually, and what the patient wants, but also with that doctor's individual clinical expertise. And so if a doctor doesn't have actual expertise and is just kind of a technician, just pushing things around because that's what they learned, that is not a basis for good evidence. And in fact, we see a lot of clinicians who are good at what they do, but don't contribute to the research, and we see many that contribute to the research, but aren't really good in clinical practice. And in fact, at lunch, we were talking about people who get research grants, but they're not actually doing good research. And then that is what is published. So we look at the bottom, the best clinical evidence, and then we are supposed to come up with this thing called EBM, or evidence-based medicine. So there are a few people that have trained really well in modern medicine or in epidemiology and have done the studies, have gathered some evidence. One of them is, I think it's actually the next paper, Professor Ioannidis. So in this paper, this group said, let's look at how good the evidence is to support primary care practice. And when they analyzed over 3,000 recommendations that are commonly in the standard of medical care in the West, they found that only 18% of them were actually what we would call high-level evidence-based medicine. And that is the basis of what modern medical doctors are practicing. So what exactly are we talking about when we talk about evidence? Then this man, this is whose paper I was looking at, John Ioannidis, he's a Greek-American. He has written a whole series of papers. This one is quite nicely written, Why Most Published Research Findings Are False. And he says, in these 5 corollaries, that there are things that you can detect in the studies that are published in some of the best journals. This one is actually in a great journal, PLOS Medicine, one of the highest impact journals. And he says, if the studies are very small and conducted in small numbers, it's likely that the research findings are not going to be true. However, the larger the number and the lesser you have tested relationships in the scientific, that field, the less likely that it will be true. So it seems to be that when the very small studies and the very big studies called big data come together, like these big meta-analyses, they seem to be applicable to no human. They're kind of an average, right? So it's like all of us, we see our shoe sizes in this room, and we create an average shoe size, and then we tell everyone, we'll all wear that shoe size. Is that shoe going to fit us? There will be a few it will fit, but for most of us, the shoe will be too small or too big. And that is what we're doing with evidence-based medicine recommendations for the most part, because we're not following what was shown in the earlier slide and the intentions of David Sackett, who invented the concept of evidence-based medicine. He and colleagues also wrote a few other papers, the subjective interpretation of medical evidence. So we take the evidence, we take the part we like, and we take those data and say, this is what we should do. If we don't like the data, we don't pay attention to it. There have been hundreds of trials on homeopathy that show in randomized, placebo-controlled, blinded studies that homeopathy works very well, especially in pediatric cases. And yet, because of the ideas of scientific medicine being based on pharmacology and dose, you can say, dose-based relationships, it's opposite in homeopathy, and so modern doctors don't accept it. And they say, oh, there's no basis for this, so we don't even want to pay attention to the evidence that's shown in the data. And this has been a big problem for homeopathy. It's been a big problem for many of the whole medical systems, the whole being systems. There are 7 sins that contribute to the lack of knowledge, and I think we've been hearing about them so far this weekend. And there's a lot of biased reporting in the media. There are certain groups, like when I was at Harvard, they have press conferences for the studies that they consider to be big bucks, and sometimes they're pharma kind of aided, meaning you get a nicer room, you get more AV, you get more journalistic coverage, you get nice drinks, because that pharma company wants that study's results to come out. And I've seen it myself, and we stay quiet in medicine. We see it. Back in the 90s, I used to get very nice pens and nice clipboards and nice things. That's become illegal now, but there is an influence of that. How many of you are doctors in this room that have been influenced by that kind of pharma trying to woo you? Yeah, at least 2 or 3 of us that are willing to admit it, yeah. So, but I liked my Vioxx pen, and I used it until it was dry. But anyway, it was obviously I was being catered to. So, there are a lot of perspectives being written by the older doctors of how to survive this misinformation crisis. And meanwhile, the market is talking. The market is talking about how they're losing faith in modern medicine. If I get sick, would I go to modern medicine? And this is the question you have to ask yourself. If you get really sick, what would you do? There are people who practice Ayurveda, a lot of them in India. I just spent 9 years in India on a Fulbright and then doing my PhD, and I just came back to the US a few years ago. And a lot of my Ayurveda colleagues who are cheerleaders for Ayurveda, if they get sick, they go to modern medicine. A lot of the Ayurvedic doctors in the USA who prachar or talk about Ayurveda, I go to their house, I look in their medicine cabinet. I know you're not supposed to do that, but I do that. And I look in their kitchen, in their pantry, and you know what I find is they have a lot of allopathic medicines. So then I wonder, then why are you talking about Ayurveda and being so true to Ayurveda? Or if they get sick, I say, oh, just get some guduchi. They don't have guduchi at home. They don't have triphala at home. They have aspirin or they have Motrin. And then you have to wonder. This is the same for people who are homeopaths, who don't use homeopathy, but would rather use allopathic medicines. Ask yourself what you actually believe in. So I did that. And when I got sick, I decided I was going to only use Ayurveda. And now I've got myself set up so that if I ever get sick of something very bad, like let's say, I only have 30 days to live or something, I'm going to find myself an Ayurvedic doctor. I've actually found him. And I will go to India and spend the rest of my days there because I am so committed to Ayurveda. But I'm a modern medical doctor, so I have to play the opposite game where if you come to my medicine cabinet, you're not going to find allopathy. A lot of consumers said the same thing. They said, we don't believe in the modern medicine, so we're going to go for alternatives. In America, there's a whole crisis in the healthcare market where they say, so many people are uninsured, they don't have health insurance, it's such a bad thing, we have to give them coverage. You know why they don't have health insurance? I asked several of them who are my patients, and they say, I don't want to waste my money on modern medicine. I would rather spend my money on aromatherapy, massage, manipulative osteopathic or chiropractic treatments, and have a steady supply of herbal medicines and spend my money on that. Emergency care could get expensive, but if you don't have that number of assets, you don't have to worry about it, and you don't invest your money on health insurance. Today in America, it's about $700 a month. $700. And only 45% of Americans have health insurance from the federal government or the national or the city or the local, or they are veterans or they are elderly. So the rest of everyone would have to pay for this. So what are they doing? They're buying alternative medicines. And I'm saying alternative, but you all know I mean the TCIM medicines. So how do we develop better models for evidence and for not BS for bullshit, but BS for belief systems? Because we have our own belief systems. And if our belief systems are that we believe good medicine is this kind of medicine based on our traditions and our culture and our ethnic and experience beliefs, is there anyone else that has a right to take that away from us? Can I force Ayurveda on everyone? No, and I shouldn't. I can tell you about Ayurveda. There might be parts of it that you like. And one of the reasons I'm aligned with it is because I'm ethnically Indian, and I grew up with it in my own life. But if someone is from Austria, or from Italy, or from South Africa, or from Iran, Japan, any other country, I don't have the right to tell them, and yet that's exactly what allopathy does. And what I have learned from medical school was that, medical school meaning allopathic medical school, was that it was our job to spread allopathic medicine to everyone all over the world and force it on them. A kind of evangelism, if you've been part of any religions that do that. Someone said earlier that modern medicine has become our religion on this planet. And are we going to stay quiet and allow that? I mean, when religious evangelism came through many lands, we put up with it. Are we going to do the same for allopathy? It seems like we kind of are. If we look at, so I took this from a gut presentation. If we look at what allopathy says versus what other groups say, allopathy talks about describing things. Allopathy is really a system in which you name things, but you don't really give the cause of it. We can name what's going on. If you ask them, what's the cause? They'll say, well, we just take the symptoms and we suppress the symptoms. Other groups around the world are spending a lot of time talking about what causes the disease. In gut diseases, it's low Agni, the low digestive fire. In biotronics, they talk about the electricity in the body, the organic electricity, which is within the body. Someone said to me last week, what do you mean electricity in the body? I said, do you know what an ECG is? Electrocardiogram. EEG, electroencephalogram. We have electricity in our body. So if the electricity is not aligned, then if you have someone that can realign that electricity, we know how fast electricity can spread through the room, as we see. This is inorganic. This is organic. So Movement and structure therapies also align the nerves and organs, and that's another theory of how etiology happens. And homeopathy talks about miasmas, and there are several concepts in different types of medicine. It's our job to learn about them, not just to have a little pronunciation of Ayurveda or homeopathy, but to understand the basic tenets. And I believe that all healers have that opportunity to do that, and I think that's one of the next things we must do. When we look at other medical systems outside of homeopathy, outside of allopathy, I think you can see it from here. The red arrows go from, can I point? Go from a pico or a nanoparticle up to about a 1 or a deca. That's it. That's modern medicine in this area here. But if you go to Avogadro's number and beyond, you'll see we can go even smaller than 10 to the minus 24th, because we have homeopathic remedies that are dilutions. And they discuss the principle of that as being important. And if you go to Ayurveda, they talk about particles, but they also talk about waves and the importance of waves. And many of the energy medicines are talking about waves. So if you look at the axiomatic scale of perception of medicines beyond allopathy, we can just understand that allopathy draws its frame this big, and this is their reality. And the rest of us who are practicing maybe some of this, but a lot more of this, are practicing larger scales of perception. And we need to teach our allopathic colleagues that they're just limited in their view, and if they could make their frame bigger, it would be important. For scale, I just put up here the diameter of the sun, which is 10 to the 13th, the diameter of the solar system. And this principle is actually found in Ayurveda. It's called, up at the top here, Yathapinde Tatha Brahmande. It means something that is very small in the microcosm has the same patterns in the macrocosm. And if we can understand that we are somewhere between these, we can actually learn a lot about patterns. The main one was in the first slide, the spiral. Look for spirals in time, in space, not only in the ocean, but in many of the activities. If you look for spirals in nature, that is actually our reality. So most Westerners think that the Earth moves around the sun. Actually, it doesn't. The sun is moving through the galaxy. And as the sun moves through the galaxy, it's pulling the Earth around it, right? So actually, as the sun moves, the Earth is moving in a spiral. So Ayurveda talks about the Earth, the astronomy, as a spiral and not as a circle. So if you can just think about what I said, and you've been thinking that the Earth is in a circle, right? And you can understand that it's in a spiral, it will just shift your reality a little bit. And that's what we need to do with the other systems of medicine. All of us, we all need to expand. So I'm going to show you a couple of principles I've been thinking about as strategies. One is we think about illness and wellness. We've talked about this at the last conference as well. There are several people who are now starting to look at wellness. So this is one group who is, they're in the Clinical Neuroscience Journal. They talk about the measures of wellness in the clinical setting. And I invite you to take a picture of this and see that what they're saying is that we need to find more about wellness and define that in neuroscience rather than always focusing on neuropathic diseases. There are a lot of scales of well-being and of wellness, and this group, the Global Wellness Institute, Susie Ellis, who's a colleague, has said, you know why we don't pay attention to wellness? Because not only there's no money in it, but wellness was about women who went for spas and looking pretty, and illness was about men who were doctors who met in offices. When the woman treated her daughter at home or her son at home, she was a flowery, lovely, nature-oriented goddess, and she was, it's free, nature is free, we all have the right to it. But the man in the white coat, and there were very few women in medicine up until about 50 years ago. In fact, clinical studies, modern medical clinical studies were only done on men because women had these weird things called cycles. So in the 1980s, the NIH decided to do studies, clinical medical studies, including women. The 1980s is not that long ago. Many of us were alive at that time. So if you look at the illness, and then you see Susie's group, which is saying, let's measure wellness, give the data, show the trends, maybe we'll get more importance to it. And indeed, that's what's happening. Their trends book every year actually talks about what could happen, and in fact, it's been predicting quite well what is the reality of the wellness movement. People are investing their own money toward wellness, toward digital detox, toward spa, toward self-care, toward care of their children, spending more time with their children at work and in ways that they haven't been able to in conventional previous times. And if you look at the $6.3 trillion wellness economy versus what's in modern medicine, we're shifting away. And there are actual data being produced, if data is the thing that's going to provide the evidence for the changes. This is a study I put in there. I've done a lot of work with the National Cancer Institute for the last 5 years. We did a survey of US Ayurveda professionals, and the big thing that we found that I thought was important is that Ayurvedic doctors who are neither legal nor illegal in the US, depending on where they are and what they're doing, they are involved with treating cancer. You think of cancer as being chemotherapy, radiotherapy, all the things that Dr. Spishak said today. But if you look at what's actually happening, patients want alternative, complementary, and integrative medicines, and they're going to Ayurvedic doctors. And you can see that there's a huge number, more than the majority of the Ayurvedic doctors in America, at least, are saying, yeah, I see cancer patients through some level of the journey of cancer. So how do we choose to see health versus medicine? I think one of the problems we have is that my experience in Ayurveda, anyway, in India, is that the Ayurvedic doctors try to pretend to be as good as the modern medical doctors. Rather than seeing that there's one part of Ayurveda, there's just a way of life. It doesn't need to be as good as allopathy, as good as a medical system, because Ayurveda is beyond a medical system. It is a way of living. Ayurveda also incorporates energy shifts, which many allopathic doctors don't understand energy beyond like the magnetic resonance imaging energy. There's an emphasis toward medical and surgical in modern medicine. There's also in many other medical systems. But that idea that you have to intervene into the body physically is something that we need to consider. And sometimes you need to go an expert, but Ayurveda really emphasizes knowing how to do a lot of interventions at home. Treating, diagnosing, mitigating, and preventing disease, which is the definition of the practice of medicine, but every mother does it with her child. And she doesn't go to jail for the practice of medicine. So we need to think about how we're allowing the medical group to see themselves as the boss when they really aren't. We need to ask these questions. Who is an expert? What is the value? Oh, sorry. What is the value of a credential? Just because I have an MD doesn't mean I'm smart. Please don't think, oh, she has an MD, that's so impressive. Sometimes those credentials are among the worst things because people feel entitlement, but they don't do the work. See who actually does the work. What is the level of practice that they have? What can they actually do right here without their tools? Or their, tools I mean by other aids. And who's doing whole being medicine versus organ systems-based medicine? Learn which TCIM policies work and which are about institutional power versus individual power. So I'm just going to put this out there. There was a call for mapping innovations in TCIM and related scientific technologies, and they put this, this call out to the world that if you guys would like to bid for a project. I had always thought the World Health Organization was in charge because they knew things. But if they have to put out a bid for a contractor to put together what I think is their essential work in TCIM, in putting together scientific technologies, that means they don't have the answer inside, right? So why are we treating WHO and NIH and these other groups as being the authority? It really alarmed me. And I look at the Sustainable Development Goals in the upper right, and I look at some of the products that they put out, and I wonder, do they really know what they're doing, or are they just kind of lost? And this is with all respect to those of you who work with WHO. You know what's going on inside. There's a lot of that smoke and mirrors going on. It's time that we take that back to ourselves. JAMA claims to be the Journal of the American Medical Association, such an authority. But if you go and you see that modern allopathic doctors are just discovering wellness, health, and medicine, and they're just discovering it, how can you be the authority when you're just discovering it and everyone else in this room already knows about it? Like, you have some homework to do if you have a credential that says that you're an expert, but you don't even know what your patients know. And that's the difficulty that I have with a lot of medical doctors who don't know their herbs, even though so many Americans are using herbs. Even in France, I'm in Paris part of the year, and I find that the medical doctors there that see my patients are giving them all kinds of solutions, but then they go out to the pharmacies and they use completely other things, right? Kiran Vyas will be talking about how he's introduced Ayurveda and yoga to, I think it's more than 80,000 people in France. Why are they not going to their free healthcare system? JAMA talks about now, oh, look, there's something called lifestyle medicine. What if we involve diet and exercise and stress management? I'm pointing toward Katarina. And they talk about how this might be important in changing people's health. Sorry, guys, you're behind the times. You know, I know I'm supposed to finish. Can I just continue? Thank you. And then Madan actually talked about these 4 pillars. And I think we appreciate it, we explain these theories, but then there's a part of me that's saying, okay, I was tolerant of it in the 90s, I was kind of tolerant of it in the 2000s. We're in 2025. When are the doctors going to decide or realize that the way that they're treating their patients is incomplete, ineffective, and in fact, it's the 3rd leading cause of death in the USA? There's evidence for that too. Instead, here are some of the things we can do. We can understand the immune system and the concept of ojas, which is the idea of having a force inside of you that both gives you strength and also keeps other diseases from invading your body. And understanding ojas, this was actually the topic of my first Fulbright, and it is a concept in Ayurveda that really talks about you having the vitality and being able to detect it in yourself. It's something that I don't think there's any modern medical concept for it, so we should just adopt the name ojas and bring it into this medical system. Understand the importance of minerals and metals in the body. We call it the metallome, and there are all these metals, so all these people that are screaming about heavy metals, try to understand that you already have heavy metals in your body, the biggest of which is iron, second is copper. I see all the Ayurvedic doctors nodding, thank you. And it's so important to have this. Yes, I know. Understanding non-pharma medicine, so this is about bhasmas, which is, I think, one of the panaceas for people who have incurable diseases, and I use regularly in my practice. And I use them legally, because there's only 4 of them that can't be brought in. I think I didn't put that slide in. Understanding foods, so if you can read an English or a Czech translation, and there are Czech translations from Ayurveda Prague, whose people are in the room, they have translated this book called the Ashtanga Hridayam, which has 2 chapters on food. And then understanding our need for alignment with the sun and the moon, which is called Dinacharya, or the chronobiology. If you can bring these concepts into whichever medical system you believe in, understanding what food products, these are called the 7 deadly whites, and understand the importance of them. And if you are eating too many food products versus foods, what is the impact in your life? And anyone that wants to see this, I'm talking about how we knew in the 1930s, early 40s, that white flour that is refined is actually detrimental. We knew it, and we ignored the evidence. And anyone that's eating white refined bread is actually poisoning themselves, and they don't realize it, and that's why we have gluten intolerance. The data are in our knowledge. Understand that scientists really don't understand water. We have many names for it in Ayurveda, Aap, Jal, and we have a deep understanding, so does homeopathy, and so do several others. I have a couple of other slides that I'm going to skip through. Ayurveda is one system that I think, if you don't know anything about it, try to just understand a few basic concepts of it, because I think the solution for us is going to be to create a medical language that doesn't translate everything into English or everything into one medical system, but rather takes a whole series of terms from different medical systems and adopts them into a language so that all doctors and all healers should know what a miasm is, what basic exercise, vyayam versus yoga. We should understand different kinds of foods. We should understand doshas, but we should also understand the basic concepts of traditional Chinese medicine, Tibetan medicine. If you say, oh, it's too much, no, it's not. No, it's not. A lot of people can learn the basics of it, and it is possible. Personalized medicine is only personalized when it adopts the whole being and helps the whole being. And there's a tool that I'll end with. There's a man that I met a couple of years ago. Several of you were at that conference. He started a company called Live Your Best Life. And what he's been doing is taking the best of machine learning and the need for data security around our health and created a way to use an app to bring Ayurvedic practice into your life. I'll talk to you guys more about that because I'm seeing someone coming onto the stage. And if you want to learn about this model, what we're doing is taking the reality that most of you guys have a phone in your hand, and wouldn't it be nice to carry a doctor around with you 24/7? So this is the tenets of our plan, and this is, I was going to go through a model of diabetes and how we see it. 2 people are standing up. This is very dangerous now. And the last, oh, and we have research evidence behind it. These are my gurus, the people that have taught me, and I pay obeisance to them. And I leave you with my email at the end and some of the schools that have taught me what I know. And I thank you all for giving me this extra time. Namaste to you. Sorry.
Dr. Bhattacharya, I have to ask you if you can swim. Ask Mr.
Is he on?
No, I'm not on.
I think.
If you can swim.
Swim?
Yes.
You have a swimming pool? I can swim. Are you going to throw me off the boat tonight?
Yes, that's it.
Are you going to throw me off the boat tonight?
Don't wait for us.
Okay, just make sure I don't have my phone on me when you throw me off.
Time.
Okay.
So, but we would like to thank you very much, Mr. Bhattacharya, for your expertise, and also for the mantra of wisdom, which filled the room and our hearts with positive energy. Thank you.